Well, you see him all throughout March Madness, breaking down every single game. One of the best in the business, CBS Sports college basketball analyst, Special K, Clark Kellogg. Clark, thanks so much for being here. I've got to say, leading up to talking to you today, my dad was so excited. You guys are partners on NBA 2K and at CBS over the years. And he said, and I quote, that you may be the nicest person in the business. He just loves you, and we love you for coming on. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Olivia. I love your dad. It's unfortunate we didn't get to work together this season, but we've worked together quite a bit over the years, and I've always enjoyed not just our time together on the microphone, but off air. We have a lot of neat conversations about our families and what's going on, and love the vibe that he brings, the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, and we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways, so I really appreciate him saying that, but love your dad and love hanging out with him, and 2K has been great for us to journey together with too. So it's been a cool relationship.
What's it like working with Kenny and Charles behind the scenes? Is it as fun as it seems on air?
Yannis, it is exactly what it appears, man. I tell people all the time, if you don't have your laughing muscles in order and in shape, you won't last because you're laughing the whole time. Charles is just a naturally gracious and funny guy. I don't know if you've had a chance to cross paths with him, but I played against him in the NBA. We've worked together now for several years. We've crossed paths through the fraternity of the NBA. Even when I was no longer a player, I was working for the Pacers for a couple of decades after I had to retire from playing, and would see all the players as I was doing road games for the Pacers on television as a commentator. And so we've had a long history of crossing paths. And then the last 7, 8, 9 years we've worked together, and it's just been an absolute blast. Great basketball knowledge, tremendous humor, a lot of mutual respect. And as is the case with any group of sports fans, when you get together, part of the fun of being able to watch games is to talk about them and debate. Players, coaches, strategy, and then you have fun. And him and Kenny are like big brother, little brother, back and forth, bickering the whole time. I'm laughing like 60% of the time, just laughing because of those two guys. So it's been great. And then Ernie stirs the pot, okay? Ernie he's like a big sibling who knows exactly which buttons to push. And so he'll spin them and it's just off and running. And Greg does the same thing in his own way, because he likes to jab me, because Greg Gumbel and I have worked together for almost 20. Well, he came back in 98. I was full-time in 90. So yeah, it's been 24, 25 years that Greg and I have worked together. So he tries all of his stand-up comic routines on me first to see if in fact they work. And then that way he can take them out on the speaking. It's a ride, man. It's so much fun. It's almost impossible to call it work. It really is. It's so much fun.
You could tell.
Yeah, that's an all-star cast there. And really, sports journalism, sports broadcasting, television in general, it's a tough business. It's really hard to sustain success. What have you learned from almost 3 decades in television? Maybe that's a kind of bigger life lesson.
You know, it's interesting, Olivia. I'm grounded. My faith is really the foundation of who I am and who I attempt to be. I gave my life to God through faith in Christ in November of 86. So I'm coming up on 36 years of being a Christ follower. And to me, it's all about seeking to follow the mandates of Scripture in how you live and how you treat people and how you work to the glory of God. So that's my audience of one. And the key has been to be me, to be genuinely me, to learn from my mess ups, to appreciate and esteem the other people that I'm part of the team with, and to try to add to what we all do together and to enjoy it. I mean, the joy that I have for life and for what God has graced me to do as a basketball player initially, realizing a dream of getting to the NBA, that was cut short because of injury after only 5 years. And then to have a chance to stay in the game, connected to the game in this way, I'm just exceedingly grateful. And so that to me is a really primary value for me, is gratitude. And that has served me well, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life. And that's how I try to approach it. I'm grateful there's tough stuff going on in our business, certainly in the world, in our relation. I mean, there's any number of things that you can see that are part of the difficulty of life. But where you have opportunity to rejoice and be joyful, I think you should do that as often as you can. And I try to walk that talk.
Like you mentioned, you got injured after 5 years. We've seen that happen to a few players like Jay Williams, Bobby Hurley. We actually had Frank Kaminsky on, and he was talking about his knee injury and how disconcerting it could be. What's that feel like when you feel like your dreams are slipping away, and how do you remain positive when, life throws you that curveball?
Well, again, I go back to my faith, Yannis. It was during my injury time that I came to a personal relationship with Christ, and that was really the anchor that kept me moving in the right direction despite the heartache. It was a devastating blow. I was 21 when I got drafted back in 1982. I was 26 when I retired. And had a promising career that ended because of my knee troubles. And yet I never thought basketball was the end of my journey. It was a means to an end. I knew there was more to me and to life than playing basketball. I was thrilled that God gave me the ability and that I had shown that I was capable and could have had a long career. But my path ended up being cut short by injury on the court. And I'm thankful for all of the people in my life. My wife, Rosie, we've been married coming up on 39 years. We dated the 3 years I was in college. She's been an anchor and a rock. I've had unbelievable people in my life, parents, extended family, mentors, teammates, friends that have helped me try to keep a good, positive perspective on where I am and where I might end up. And hey, life isn't always smooth. And I was grateful. Again, I go back to gratitude. I had to retire at 26 with a promising career in front of me, but I got there. I actually was there and proved that I belonged and was probably destined for some better things on the court had I stayed healthy. But I wouldn't trade it to lose playing basketball and gain an eternal relationship with God through Christ. I'd take that any day.
That's really beautiful testimony. Great words for anyone to hear. I think part of what you're saying really relates to March Madness of no one knows the future of a lot of these players. So it's so fun to watch them at this stage. And we're seeing star players on star Final Four bound teams go down with a minute left in the game. And it feels so unfair and sad. But what do you think makes that special, to turn it positive, about March Madness of so many of these players will not go pro or will not have the careers maybe they envision now? What makes it special in March?
Well, Olivia and Yannis, I think there are so many dimensions in the human experience that are embodied in March Madness. The wonderful highs you see from achieving a goal. And for some, that goal is simply making the field of 68.
Sure.
For some of those schools, the Longwood Lancers, first time in program history, they're part of the field of 68. For others, it's going from winning a game to winning two or getting to the second week to the second weekend. I mean, there are just so many elements of the human experience: achievement, competition, disappointment, heartache, unpredictability, uncertainty, camaraderie, relationships. Outside of the games, the bands and the fans have an experience that's special, whether it's watch parties or being part of a tournament run or just being in the venue with other fans. So there's so many levels and layers of the human experience. Some of the stories that we discover and uncover away from the game: a blind radio broadcaster, a kid that is part of a team, he's got developmental disabilities and the other team allows him to score 3-4 buckets. I mean, those kind of things resonate on a human level. And that's the magic of March Madness, is because across the spectrum of our challenges, our joys, and everything in between, you see elements of that in this 3-week run to a championship. And whether you're a Rabid fan, whether you're a journalist, whether you're a broadcaster, whether you're a coach, the parent or the aunt or uncle or cousin of a player or manager, there's a connection that touches here, that touches your heart. And when you have things that are life-giving and touch your heart, it's memorable. and it's impactful. And that's what, to me, is the essence of why this tournament is such a cultural phenomenon. You can't explain it. You only can say that it will always deliver. It will always deliver.
Well
Boy, the
said.
NCAA needs to clip that and just make it their commercial. That's what they need
I've
to
said
do.
it. I've said it countless times in our seminars and anytime on interviews when people give me the runway. I've said that and shared that, and that's really how I feel. I mean,
I felt like I was in college basketball church right there. That was beautiful.
Yep.
Speaking
You were,
of,
Yannis. You were. That's what just happened there.
yeah. Speaking of amazing storylines that capture our imagination, St. Peter's, their run was incredible. Not to talk too much X and O's just yet, but what do you think went wrong? Were they overwhelmed by a better team? Were they intimidated by a powerhouse team? It seemed like everything went wrong. It seemed like the game they were playing kind of went out the window when they played North Carolina. Was it North Carolina that got them out of that rhythm? What do you think went wrong for them that they got beat so bad after such an amazing run? And what went right for that amazing run?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, the unpredictability of sports is that sometimes you just have a bad day. I mean, you can't make shots. The ball is falling. It's in line, it's online, and it somehow spits out. I mean, that happens, whatever sport you're playing. In tennis, the ball's not being hit in the sweet spot of the racket. In golf, you're missing 6 or 8 foot putts. I mean, that happens. But I think the bigger thing, they actually were able to play their game in the first 3 games. They played primarily from the front. They only trailed by 6 points twice. They trailed by 6 against Kentucky late in regulation, I think. And then they trailed by 6 right before halftime against Purdue, but got a bucket to cut it to 4 at the half. Never trailed against Murray State. And that allowed them, Yannis and Olivia, to play the way they're best suited to play. To let their defense dictate, to control pace, and then let those 4 guards, and the big guys too, that can create and make plays and make shots, do it from a position of on the lead. And that put pressure on those higher seeded teams. And they were able to ride that. Carolina was the only team that jumped out to a significant lead early. I think it was a combination of that and the size across every position for North Carolina. Baycott, Manick, Caleb Love, the Leaky Black, the size and the start of Carolina is what did them. And as a matter of fact, leading up to that game, I told everybody, I'm anxious to see what St. Peter's does when they're uncomfortable, meaning if they're down by more than 2 possessions. And Carolina jumped out, I think, either 9-0 or 9-2, and they could never find. And then they missed some shots. And then that was the other part I mentioned, that they had some shots that had been falling that just didn't go. And in the one-game circumstance, that can happen. I mean, we see it all the time. So I think it was a combination of those factors. They got behind early, and the size and the quality of how North Carolina has played really just wore them down and never gave them a chance to find a rhythm.
Well, now North Carolina's headed to the Final Four, going to New Orleans. They've had a lot of success in history in New Orleans under Dean Smith, but only one seed has made it to New Orleans, 2 seeds, obviously. Do you think that the best 4 teams are making it to the Final Four of everyone you saw this tournament?
Yeah, I do. I really do now that I look at it. And as a matter of fact, we all felt there was going to be chaos, that the teams on the top 4 seed lines were not going to stay as they were seeded, just because there's so much compression across college basketball with the transfer portal. Teams are able to get older and better far quicker than they used to be. So that's why you saw so many of the different types of upsets and not many of the top 2 seed lines advancing. We've got, 2 2s and a 1. And then we've got, who's our other team? Villanova, then North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. So that's fairly unique. Yeah, that's fairly unique in terms of the makeup of the Final Four. It's power stacked because of the pedigree of those programs and the championships that are represented. But I think the compression was a huge part of seeing what we saw during the first 2 weeks and what we have remaining in the Final Four. There just are more good teams and not much gap between the good teams and not many great teams. With these four, I think have earned their way there, and it's a shame that Nova is without Justin Moore, who tore his Achilles in that game that you referenced a little bit ago.
So we know Villanova's without Justin Moore. He tore his Achilles, and that was so painful for everyone to watch. He's the team's second leading scorer, but he leads in minutes, and he always guards the best perimeter player. And they've had this strong six-man rotation. Now they're down to five because their bench is pretty non-existent. Like a lot of teams in March, they really shorten the bench. And I saw a stat that really startled me, that players 7 through 12 on Villanova's team don't even average 10 minutes or 2 points per game. How much does that concern you in their meeting with Kansas?
Well, I've adhered to this philosophy for a long time in my days in the NBA as a player and then as a broadcaster, and certainly as I've covered college basketball for over 3 decades. I think a team is most dangerous in the first game after losing a key player. And I'll tell you why. A couple of reasons. One, the opposing team exhales just a little bit. One of their key guys is not there. We're good. They shouldn't be able to beat us without one of their starters. And Justin Moore is more than just another starter. He's an indispensable, valuable piece at both ends of the floor. The other reason, and probably the more prevalent one, is that the other guys, in the absence of a key teammate, relish the opportunity to rise up and do more and typically play better. Will that be enough against Kansas? A team that's played at a really high level all season long and has added Remy Martin to the mix, who's been outstanding in the tournament? I don't know. But to dismiss or discount Villanova because of the absence of Justin Moore is the wrong position to take. And again, the way the Villanova Wildcats do things, they're always developing players. They have a system where guys come there recognizing and understanding that they're going to wait their turn, but they're always being prepared to play. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see somebody from that Villanova roster in that 7 to 12 man you talked about, Olivia, that hasn't played much, step in and play a significant role in 10, 12, whatever spot minutes he might get. But the other guys, Caleb Daniels in particular, certainly Jermaine Samuels, Colin Gillespie, Slater, I see all of those guys raising their level and competing at a high level.
You mentioned how tough Kansas is going to be. Obviously, they're the only 1 seed remaining, but I live in Kansas City, and I feel like Kansas has gotten here the quietest. I don't know if people don't like to give them credit due to the ongoing investigation and infractions or what. Why do you feel like Kansas is kind of quietly, again, getting to another Final Four?
Hey, it's very simple. It's very simple. There's only so much room on the marquee. Somebody has to be left out. Duke and Coach K was going to swallow up any marquee this year. That was inevitable. That's like the Cleveland Cavaliers having great teams and Michael Jordan's in Chicago. So somebody is going to be left out and short-sighted, and it happens to be Kansas, a number 1 seed that perhaps has been the most consistent of any of these teams from start to finish. And then you factor in adding Remy Martin, who was injured and not up to par most of that time. Bill Self told us on Selection Sunday night, this is the most whole that his team has been, and he feels really good. And they showed it in the second half against Miami. That Kansas team could win it all. And that's the way they're probably going to have to play to win it all. But they're more than capable of doing that.
Duke and North Carolina, not a bigger rivalry in sports. They have never met in the tournament. Coach K's final season. Do you think God wants to see this game in the tournament?
Hey, divine intersections are real in my world, Yannis. I'm not sure where that would land, but clearly, this is of monumental, humongous significance that in this season, the last lap for Coach K, his Duke team has grown up in front of us. With each passing tournament game, they've shown another level of maturity. We know the talent. I didn't think they would get to this point, Olivia and Yannis, because I thought youth would at some point, youth and perhaps the pressure of being part of Coach K's last hurrah would get to them, but it's been exactly the opposite after the loss to Carolina and Cameron Indoor. That was too much. When you factor in the rivalry, the quality of the opponent, the pressure that I think those young men felt with all of the former Dukies in attendance and it was just it was a major, major deal. And to try to even figure out what they were feeling emotionally is beyond me being able to do justice to. But since then, they've grown up and they're playing with confidence, joy, and dare I say, love for each other, love for their coach, love for the opportunity to gift him something that would be super special to be part of. And that's what they're thinking about. That's how they're playing. And I think they've got the best player in the tournament in Paolo Banchero. So I think Duke wins it. I'm excited. That matchup is just, my goodness. First time in the tournament. What's at stake? Oh, my goodness. It's going to be absolutely insane. And I'm already having a tough time trying to tamp Kenny down. We're just going to be almost – it's going to be almost unbearable with that dude for the next couple of days.
Oh, yeah. When you look back at their meeting a couple weeks ago, as you mentioned, it felt like it was for all the marbles at the time. Well, now it actually is. And I saw that Grant Hill was making a case that both teams needed that outcome. Duke needed to lose. Carolina needed to win to make the tournament, to get that 8 seed. They were a bubble team at the time. We kind of forget that. What makes this time around different for both teams, especially Duke? You said maybe they're playing a little bit differently now, and Coach K's adjusted a bit. Yeah,
I think we grow through each period we go through. And each game is a new entity in and of itself. You look at what happened in the past for context, but the next 40 minutes they play will be a whole new story. It won't hunt back to what happened in Cameron. But I do think as you journey through whatever your journey is, that you have to go through some of the bumps. I think rain and sunshine are needed for growth. As a matter of fact, God lays it out that way in creation. Grass and trees and flowers, they don't just grow because of sun. They need water and rain too. And sometimes trees need the winds of adversity, the real winds, to be able to get their roots anchored in. Hubert Davis went through it as a first-year head coach in North Carolina. It was a little bumpy. Criticism was coming his way, which is ridiculous to me. But nonetheless, you go through periods of questioning, figuring it out, having some failures. The same with Duke, and that's all part of the journey. And I'm excited about this matchup. And I think both teams will play relaxed and confident and put together a show that we'll be talking about for a long time, I hope.
Relaxed?
Yeah. I think there's a relaxation that comes when you get between those lines. When you're outside of it, I think I've always used this phrase, lose yourself in the game. And I was telling some of our coworkers, some of our camera folks and technicians, when I got between the lines, it was a long time ago, but I felt the crowd and heard them, but there was no distraction from the crowd. There was no distraction from anything once I got between the lines. There were butterflies in the opening introductions, but once you get through that first period of sweat or rebound or shot attempt, it's on from there, and you're lost in what you're trying to do. And I think that's the case. I think most players would say that.
I'm definitely rooting for North Carolina because I grew up a Knicks fan, so I'm with Hubert Davis. He played for the Knicks.
Gotcha.
Behind the scenes, is Charles just picking Duke because he wants to get under Kenny's skin? Is he just going with Duke?
I'm sure there's an element of that. They're like big brother, little brother. So, anytime you can jab your little brother, then you want to jab him. So I think there's an element of that. But I do think he also is kind of riding the wagon I'm on as we've watched this Duke team continue to show great maturity. And there's an energy and a joy in both the players and Coach K that is palpable. You can feel it. You can see it and you can hear it in comments, in the post-game press conferences, his interactions. I mean, and that's special. Not that it doesn't happen with other teams, but this is his last time around. This is a unique set of circumstances. And to see that kind of bond, that kind of power, that kind of growth take place, and to see the joy that they're playing with, I think it's going to be a really hard combination to keep from winning that championship on Monday night, because they've got talent too. I mean, it's not like this is all some kind of emotional smoke and mirrors. They got 3 or 4 guys that look for sure like NBA players going forward. So the talent and the power of love is a pretty strong combination. Not to mention that guy sitting on the sidelines who knows a little bit about what he's doing.
Is he the best coach of all time?
I'm not quite ready to go there, Giannis. He clearly is on the short list of roll call. It's the same debate with Michael or Kareem or LeBron. It's fodder for a talk show and barbershops and the like. I'm not ready to go there, but he's clearly. I mean, the list is, and not just in basketball. I think it's in all sports. You would put him on a very short list of the greatest coaches of all time. As a matter of fact, you can't have a list and he's not on it. That's how I look at it. Whether you put him at the top, that's a matter of personal preference. But he's there clearly, and remarkable his impact and influence on the game.
You mentioned all the talent Duke has. I think a lot of people think they are the better team, but North Carolina's style is very modern, very NBA style. It's almost positionless. There are times with all 5 players on the perimeter. How do they match up when we get down to X's and O's?
I think they match up well. They'll have to be, obviously, great points you make, Olivia, because Carolina does play a lot of 4 out. Baycott is the one guy who typically stays anchored inside, but everybody else, particularly Manick, is a real problem matchup because of his size and ability to shoot it. He gets in there for ball. I mean, and Caleb Love is just a dynamic 2-guard who's got size and deep range. I think they match up well, though. They'll have to be disciplined on defense, but I think it'll be an up and down game. I'm imagining 75 will be the low water mark for both teams. I think it's going to be somewhere north of that, just in terms of possessions and scoring. But I think they match up well. Duke has shown some zone defense on occasion, which has served them well. Did so against Texas Tech. I think it helped them a minute with Arkansas. Wouldn't be surprised to see that be part of the equation at some point. But I think we'll see a lot of exciting playmaking on both sides.
So are you saying, in conclusion, it's Villanova, Duke, and Duke wins it all? Coach K.
I'm saying it's Duke. No, I'm saying it's Duke. I'm saying it's Duke and Kansas, and Duke wins it all.
Duke and Kansas.
That's my Duke and Kansas. Yeah, I mean, I think Villanova's going to compete. I don't know if they can beat Kansas the way Kansas is composed, and the fact they have inside-outside balance, and they'll have probably eight. I think Bill's been playing right around 8.5 guys, and I think that might, at the end of the day, be a factor. But I like Kansas because of their total package. But I wouldn't be surprised if Villanova prevailed. I wouldn't, but I'm picking Kansas. I picked Kansas and Duke to get to the championship game, with Duke cutting down the nets in a storybook ending for Coach K.
Oh, I love it. If they lose, do you believe that he's really retiring? It's tough to believe in sports now when someone says they're retiring.
It is. You're right, Olivia. My guess is yes, he would. I mean, there's so much that he has to enjoy. I don't know him that well. I've interacted with him several times over the years and have great admiration and respect for him as a growing and evolving leader. I think that's his greatest attribute. He's never stopped pursuing what it means or looks like to be an effective leader. And that's a lesson for all of us. We all have spheres of influence and opportunities to lead, and leadership is really influence at its core. One of my mentors told me that, and I really believe it. It's influence. How do you influence others for good and for their best and for the good of all? And he's about that. And you can see it so many ways over the years where he's modified. And I think his Olympic experience has fortified some of that. And the fact that he's always eager to learn and grow and evolve as a leader. He talked about it a little bit in an article I read this year. He took a look at himself after that loss to North Carolina and how he needed to serve this group better. That speaks volumes to what he's been able to do and is a real cornerstone, I think, of his 40-plus years of success.
Yeah. To think of how he's evolved with the game of one and dones, of NIL, of all the way the game has changed so much, and he's still able to relate to kids he's recruiting in high school. That's pretty impressive. I've got one more question for you, Clark, because I think there's a fifth character in this Final Four story, and that's the city of New Orleans itself. Yeah. Do you think there might be any kind of voodoo energy where anything can happen? Are there any curses that these teams should be wary of?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say curses, or I wouldn't name them, but clearly there's an element of the mysterious that is part and parcel of the history of New Orleans. And you can go down any road you want to with that because it does exist and it's real. Whether or not it plays out in the games, I'm not ready to jump there, but it is somewhat apropos that as we come out of a COVID-impacted tournament, not having one in 20, having it in one location in 21, with the elements between the lines that New Orleans would be the backdrop for this particular Final Four.
Last question for me. You've been following college basketball, like you said, for decades, so closely. This tournament, what is your favorite moment? Was it Christian Laettner from Grant to win it? Chris Webber calling the fake timeout? Carmelo carrying the team? Danny Manning? When you look back, what was the most amazing thing you've seen in this tournament?
I love all of those, and it would take me a minute to kind of rank them in order. But there's only one moment that goes to the top of my tournament moment list. And that's when our son Nick was part of the 2012 Ohio University team that was a 13 seed and made a run to the Sweet 16 and took North Carolina, a shorthanded North Carolina team. Kendall Marshall, the starting point guard, had got hurt in the game prior, so he wasn't available. And the Bobcats took North Carolina to overtime with a chance to go to the Elite Eight. And Nick played well in both games to get there and played really well in that game. And to me, that's the greatest basketball moment in my history. Whether my playing, my accomplishments, there's nothing that will ever compare to what I was able to watch and witness and feel, seeing him have his one shining moment. That tops them all for me.
Oh, that's really good. Well, you have a busy weekend ahead of you, Clark. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you aren't already following Clark Kellogg on Twitter, give him a follow at Clark Kellogg with 2 G's, CBS. It was so much fun talking hoops with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Great to visit with you, Olivia, as well as you, Yannis. Enjoy the tournament from wherever you happen to be. It should be fun, and I'm looking very much forward to the next few days.
Dream come true for me, man. I'm a big fan, so thank you so much.